All
All
right.
right, we'll get started. So what's going on, everyone? Thought we'd chat with Marcus, otherwise known as TSPLY today. So Marcus, thanks for taking the time, dude.
Thank you, Preston.
Mark's and I are friends outside of YouTube, TikTok, and all that. We live like an hour apart from each other, and we talk about this stuff all the time. Like almost every day, going back and forth on
Yep.
the different stuff we're making videos about. So half the time it ends up in like 30, 45-minute rants about stuff. Thought it'd be whatever. Maybe it'd be interesting to
Well,
record that at one point.
I will say I'll call you and ask you like for a suggestion because I'm about to be a dad and you're a great dad. And then we're like, and by the way, about Gaza.
Yeah, can you
So-
believe this, that, or the other? But like, there's always a bunch of, as we're doing the research, I imagine the same way. There's all sorts of different like topics and things that I want to like talk to people about. And the reason I started making these videos is because I was looking for people to engage with this stuff on, and the comments can be a way sometimes. Of course, there's some great back and forth there, but I don't know. It's easy to just get you on the call and ask some of these things. So I had a couple written down. I was going to run
okay.
by you.
I got some for you. And the thing is, we'll talk to each other and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I just learned something from you. So maybe we'll learn something here. I'm
That's
sure we
actually,
will.
yeah, that's one of the things I'm going to get into. But first out, I wanted to hit you with the protests. So there's been more, not to get into the details, but like there's been a lot of how do you even phrase them, like anti-war, pro-Palestinian protests across the United States. They've been global, but
Okay.
there's been a lot across the United States, and I've gotten mixed feedback and like some DMs with people, emails going back and forth, but wanted to get your take on those. How are you viewing those
Okay.
right now?
Well, like you had mentioned, you isolated it to the United States. I think that's extremely important because I know keep the United States, but when you look at other countries like France and Germany, they're straight up like, you can't do this. This is illegal. Not
That's
happening
true.
in the United States, totally different. But in the United States, from a American perspective, we have freedom of speech, freedom of protest. But this particular protest has been there's religious ideologies behind this that's been festering up for a long time. So the thing that I'm seeing about these protests, both sides are right in a way. If you can always nail down something on both sides. Now, what do I mean by that? Hamas attacked Israel. Israel has collateral damage within Gaza, so people are going to be mad. So you can always find something right on both sides. It's just that these protests, they get violent. And that is honestly to me the
The
biggest
protests
issue.
get violent. I haven't seen that in the U.S.
In the United States, you had the Jewish man get hit with the megaphone.
Not saying it didn't happen. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean stuff like that.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm seeing. Could be wrong, but these protests, I think either side, it's leading into that direction. Unfortunately, you have a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric, anti-Semitic rhetoric.
So
That's
I
the
will
that's what
say
I'm
that
seeing from the
was
United States.
that's what I was going back and forth with this person on. And it was a really
Yeah.
respectful engagement. But like because I referred to them as big picture anti-war rallies, because
Okay.
by and large the statements being made are for ceasefire. So if you take it at face value, it's opposing war, which the way it came up, as I said, these are like the largest anti-war rallies we've had since Iraq. The comment I got back on that was there's a lot of anti-Semitism mixed in. And it's tough because, like, so for one, I'll say there's more anti-Semitic comments and actions being taken now than I expected. Like, it's awful and it's incredibly sad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess that's been festering. I call
Now,
me blind to that. That's
now
caught me off guard.
the question is, are you protesting Israel to Gaza or United States supporting Israel?
Yeah,
That's
and
that's where I'm a little confused.
I've seen some good interviews with people that are in those protests, and their biggest
Yeah.
argument or biggest frustration is that it's U.S. equipment being used in the war. So, like, look, I'm
Yeah.
certain now, just because we've seen it, there's definitely some anti-Semitism mixed in some of these things, but it's hard for me to say like it's definitely one or definitely the other. I feel
Mhm.
like there's a lot of factors that make people. And I had a great comment from somebody the other day saying they were talking with their friends and they see every day footage of Palestinian children being killed.
Exactly. And that's why I said I think you can isolate both sides, could have an argument. If you see the picture, you're like, it happened. Now, if you want to get into some weird stuff, some people are saying the pictures are fake, and some saying this is not real. We don't have enough evidence. But nonetheless, the protests are happening. So obviously people are believing something here. And again, I do want to say there's anti both Muslim and Semitic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say I feel like there's been more anti-Semitism than Islamophobia, but I don't know how to effectively measure that, or if it depends how you're taking in media. Um, yeah, it's a
That's
lot.
true.
It's a lot flying around there.
That's
I
true.
got a couple others I'm going to run through here, but I don't want to steamroll
Yeah,
it.
give me the hardest question you have. Give me something crazy.
Sources. Just you already brought something up that I wasn't aware of, the Jewish man being beaten in one of these protests. There's like a combination of a ton of information coming out, unofficial information coming out, and then like in official sources, not a lot. Where are you, like, what's your process for gathering information day to day? Because I
Right.
think this is
Okay.
different.
Yeah, because I'm curious what you're gonna say because this is I have no idea what you're gonna say, so this is gonna be funny. So I'm gonna give the annoying answer of yes is my source. So in this conflict, you have the extremes of biases. We support Hamas, we support Israel. And then from there, you go down into the middle and hopefully try to take the risk and pick a side of, I think this is true. So I'll give you my exact source. And I think you also use this source, which is OSINT Defender, OSINT Defender. If you guys want to look that up on Twitter. Now, this is just a hub for something that may have happened. So I'll give you an example of like how you would be able to find your source. So let's say in Syria, Damascus got hit with an airstrike from Israel. Okay, who reported that? Fox News. Let me look at Al Jazeera, because we all know they're the opposite perspective. Al Jazeera will say something has happened in this area. Okay, we're getting closer and closer. And now we live in a day and age, which is interesting. You can find a lot of home video on Twitter. So if you type in like hashtag airstrike Syria or hashtag whatever, that is truly the way I do it. So I'll use open sources, and then from there I'll go to the extremes: Fox, Al Jazeera, home video. There might be something on Telegram that is massive, and that's how I will decipher whether or not something is legit. If it's super specific, if it's straight from the DoD, I'm gonna trust them for the most part. If like a ship moved to the Red Sea straight from the DoD, okay, that's all you really need. Now I'll shoot the question back at you. How do you decipher a specific like event? What is your process? Because I know there's a lot of people who want to get real information out there.
Yeah, it's messy because the easiest way is just to follow like major news outlets, because they do put out information on this conflict and all conflicts every day. Usually it's a little behind, and usually it's, which isn't always a bad thing, right? Especially when we're trying to sift through and find out what's accurate and what's not. But it's also usually pretty vague. And I found that a lot of the people that are watching these videos aren't interested in they're looking for more than a very, very high level 2-sentence explanation of what's happening. So that's the easy answer. But in terms of figuring out the information, I one, try to present anything directly from the source. So if Israel puts something out, presenting that as Israel put this out, the number of airstrikes launched or Hamas commanders killed or whatever it might be, like, it's coming from Israel. We really don't have like independent third parties on the ground. So anybody doing investigative reporting right now is starting with either information coming from Hamas or Al Jazeera in some cases, or the IDF. So big picture, direct information from Israel, and then direct information from Hamas. They're on Telegram. They've got a crazy amount of, they got an app now. Do not download the Hamas app. But
Not a sponsor.
yeah, I think there's some value in presenting information straight from either one of those two. And I would not take 100% of either. What any belligerent in any war, you're not going to take 100% of what they say and die on that hill and say they said that it has to be true. But I think when you're trying to keep up with something, just putting that information out there, here's what the two sides said. And then when it comes to individual events, if it's not coming from one of those two sides, usually I wait for multiple sources, multiple different sources. So sometimes there's some great like independent analysts on Twitter that get a lot of things right and are very careful in what they put out. They get a bad name because they're on Twitter or Telegram and all that stuff.
Sure.
Sometimes there's other accounts that just they post the first thing they can find and it's overblown and all that. But generally, one of those comes out. Wait to see who else talks about it, who else can verify it, and even then, kind of approach with caution. There's a lot of intentionally bad information out there on top of the unintentionally bad.
So how many chances do you give someone until, like, I'll be straight up honest with you, the Israeli Times, I don't use them anymore. I'm going to be honest with you because they've had stories like Biden said this. Actually, and Biden and his administration said we don't even know what they're talking about. So like how many chances do you give a source
a
until
point.
you're like, you know what, I don't know anymore. I'm done with them.
That's tricky. That there's not something I can dial in there because sometimes I do think people get things wrong incorrectly. Yeah. They're just trying to put something out quickly, and maybe the information wasn't there. I don't know. You kind of gauge that as you go, right? And start to figure out like this person, I'm gonna triple check this before taking anything. And there's I still follow a bunch of accounts where it's like because they get the information out quickly. It's like I'm not talking about that for a while.
And you do pose a good point where it's like, I need to know right now. I need to know if this is true. And I like to ask the commenter, like, does your life really change if you knew that this specific quadrant of the airport was attacked? Like, we could take a couple of minutes here to figure out whether or not this is true, because again, you sift through all this information. It's like, this happened, retracted. And then you're sitting there like, but what actually happened? So.
Yeah, it's tough. We don't need to know the exact, we don't have to know it right now.
It's true.
Realistically, we could get everything a week late, but we're all kind of conditioned. And I wouldn't want that selfishly. I want to know what's happening right now.
True. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to ask you a question. For those of you who don't know, Preston is an officer in the Army, and I like to pick his brain because as a low-ranking military member, E4, combat engineer, Preston, I like to go to him for like actual tactical questions in the large scheme of a battle space. So now, for those of you who are not aware, Israeli Defense Forces quite literally cut Gaza in half. And now you have a northern campaign, southern campaign, but the north is isolated. Preston, my question to you, what do you see are the challenges here? And like when you see this from a commander's perspective, are you like, oof, I don't know how they're going to do this, or I don't know how I would do that if like you were in charge of a combat space? What are the challenges here?
Yeah. So for starters, I'm a major in the reserves now, left active as a captain, artillery guy, never commanded a force this size, or in a fight of this magnitude. I mean, we were in Afghanistan, but it wasn't like what these guys are going to deal with in Gaza. So no firsthand experience here, but we've studied a lot of those things. And I was to armchair quarterback it, a little surprised that they cut Gaza City off like they did, just because those tunnels are all across the entire strip. So from the outside looking in, it's almost like they drew an arbitrary line and said, from here, we're gonna clear this area. But you got to think that some of the Hamas fighters are able to exit through those tunnels underneath the Israeli lines that they've established to the south of Gaza City. In a perfect world, they would have, again, no civilians, unlimited military resources. You would have had forces moving in from every direction and just completely seal that off. Step 1 inch into Gaza, dig down, shut down the tunnels and move forward. That's a substantial effort and not realistic. So I don't know. I did hear a report today that Israel's not planning on going door to door like we did in Fallujah, the United States. I wasn't in Fallujah. But things like Fallujah and Ramadi, where it was like house to house clearing. I heard the report today was that Israel's planning on going in, setting up strong points, essentially, and then conducting targeted raids. To identify tunnels and locations, and then pulling back, airstrikes, gather more intelligence, raids, kind of, in a sense, starving them out.
Okay. There's also this phase of a tactical pause. Have you ever heard of this? Or at first it was a ceasefire, then a pause, and a ceasefire. Now we're on a 4-hour tactical pause. Seems to be the operating procedure. Have you ever heard of that? Do you have a comment about that? Are you looking into it?
I saw something today that Al Jazeera reported that Qatar is negotiating a ceasefire. Um, not, but they're like not wanting to use the ceasefire term. Is humanitarian pause was the term they used. I don't know. I mean, it's a ceasefire. I don't know what else to call it. Like if you try to
Yeah.
get the two warring sides to stop for a period of time to do something, like that's a ceasefire. I call it whatever you want.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't know that Israel has any intention of doing that right now. There's a lot of pressure on them to allow more humanitarian aid in, but I think Israel's in a better position militarily now than they were a few weeks ago, and they weren't going to do it a few weeks ago. So I don't know.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you when you hear that? When you hear humanitarian pause or ceasefire, you think that's realistic?
I think every military in the United States, a lot of veterans have complained about it in Afghanistan, but they still had to do it. You have to allow civilians a chance of survivability. I've always taken that ground. Now I understand from the perspective of Israel, this war is new, and from the United States perspective, when we went into Iraq, there were rules of war, but everyone knows, like, hey, we went in there and we did what we had to do, and unfortunately, a lot of people got hurt. Not saying it's excusable, but I think Israel is still in that new phase of we know we need to help people, but remember what happened in October, because we're always going to remember that. So I think you always need to allow civilians a chance to survive, and Israel is opening up lanes of people
Yeah.
to walk through. They are doing that. There's visual evidence. Like I'm seeing it. I don't think it's fake. It's right there. And
Not
so
an AI video.
I hope not. Now, what's interesting is like, I don't know if 4 hours is enough to totally regroup for someone like Hamas, because we don't know how vast the tunnel system is. One of the an interesting way that it was described, the tunnel systems was a spider web. I don't know if you saw that. One of the hostages says it was like a spider web in there. And when you look at a spider web, you're like, you can go in any direction. It's organized and it's chaos. And so we don't know what 4 hours is to Hamas. That could be enough to get them to either evacuate the area, but that's what Israel's contention was like, yo, 4 hours. I mean, Hamas is locked and loaded, and now we're going to get attacked. So I
Yeah.
think they need to do it. They need to do it.
And to be fair, I don't think when you're looking at a ceasefire like that in the middle of a military operation, it's not necessarily that an entire force would be able to rearm and re-equip, but it just shuts down the battlefield. So like I'm not moving across this open street in daylight hours to pull out, the munitions that are over there or to restock supplies. But the minute there's a ceasefire, like let's go, rebuild that sandbag position and shift that mortar firing point from point A to point B. Like it's not nothing. It does provide a little window to move things around a bit.
Well, you brought up Fallujah at the beginning of beginning of this interview. We're talking. What's interesting is this ceasefire has happened in stride, which means like all of a sudden it happened. There was definitely no indication from the beginning of the conflict, like, okay, let's go, let's go, let's go. Stop. When it came to the United States with Fallujah, they were at the face of Fallujah, staring at Fallujah, and now we're telling you to leave. Israel sort of did the opposite, where they're like, hey, we're coming into Gaza, just so you know, we're going to split Gaza in half. You need to evacuate. Nobody evacuated. Whereas now they get to northern Gaza, everything's going, and they're like, okay, get out of here. And I just think that's a weird contrast where the United States goes face to face with the city, and then they say, okay, you guys can get out of here now. We're giving you a 3-day window, but those 3 days, it doesn't look like the United States was too worried about like rearming or reorganizing. They knew going into that hey, we did what we could do. There was some sort of evacuations, but we're going to go forward with this. Where Israel's like, we're trying to move forward, stop. Trying to move forward, stop. Does that make sense with the contrast there?
Yeah, I got you. I don't know that you can die. It's right 6-1. I feel like at that point it's commander's discretion, and
Sure.
one might work out well in the long term, the other might not.
Yeah.
I think in Israel's case, the more civilians they can get to exit the battlefield, the better.
Sure.
From a moral standpoint, we want to see everybody, I think, around
Yeah.
the world wants to see fewer civilians killed. And in terms of Israel's support to take on Hamas, every civilian that's killed chips away at that.
Well, and I think from the outside perspective, from civilians to everyone, they're like, what's wrong with 4 hours? Like, it's just 4 hours. To Israel, it's like, we don't even want to give them 30 seconds. Like, it's So that seems to be where the discrepancy is in my comment section and from what I'm seeing at least.
All right, bigger picture. There was a poll. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I got real fired up about it yesterday in a video. But
okay.
It talked about U.S. support for intervening in Iran. Let me see if I still have it up here.
Yeah.
So I can say it exactly.
Yes. I want accuracy.
Yeah, right. Let's see. U.S. responsibility. Should the United States directly intervene in the conflict if Iran attacks Israel? 59% yes, 41% no.
Interesting.
So where do you not your personal, you can share that if you want, but like
sure.
That says 60% of Americans would be interested in some sort of intervention if Iran attacked Israel. Do you think that's accurate? Where do you think that sets?
I will say this first. I don't think people realize we already are doing that. And so my question is in this poll, and I guess you would be able to decipher this, is this if Iran, the country, sends something straight to Israel, we are in on this? Is that what this poll is saying? Because Iran has proxy units all over, and the United States has been attacked around 50 times already. Now, is that Iran or not Iran? Because we're sort of intervening here. So
it doesn't, it's a poll, right?
Right.
It's vague and stays high level, but it does not say proxies. It says if Iran attacks Israel. So my read on that is if Iranian military forces attack Israel is the way I would interpret that.
I would be on the yes side, because if not, I think the United States loses all trust with everyone because we're supposed to be the best friends with Israel. And we've already established ourselves in a position of, from the White House, not me, worst case scenario. Worst case scenario implies Iran intervening. So I would be on that side, yes. But I'm also reporting on this that we are already there. We are intervening. The United States is taking a brunt of the attacks in Syria and Iraq and some portions of Jordan.
So
this is not me being like a warmonger. I would love for this not to happen, but I think it puts us in a corner of we're just going to sit there and not let, like, somebody has to do something.
I got you.
How about you?
The number threw me off because what I'm thinking about is if we wake up tomorrow morning and the news is that Iran launched a missile attack against Israel and struck Israeli, Air Force bases, that 60% of Americans would be like, great, let's go attack Iran. And if we're talking about this little tit for tat stuff we've been doing with them for 20 years, fine. But I feel like there's been a lot of talk from some of our leaders recently about going directly after Iran. Like, I can't remember who it was recently. There was a politician who said, we got to stop nickel and diming these proxy groups and go and cut the head off the snake. Like that's Iran. That is not, let's ding up Hezbollah a little bit or go after, some of these proxies in Iraq or Syria. That is Iran. And I don't know. I don't feel like that's the kind of thing that draws the United States into a full conflict.
Well, like the Houthis, Iran, took out a drone. Are we going to go to war over that? Right? The Russians took out a U.S. drone, maybe on accident, maybe on purpose.
But war was never really in the conversation for either one of those, right?
Right. So again, with these polls, I know it's a vague thing, but now it's like, what constitutes the attack? Because, you had in Iraq the missiles launched on those, I forget, you know what I'm talking about?
Al-Assad Air Base got hit a couple of years ago. Yeah.
We didn't go to war.
We're close. I think that was probably the closest we've been, though, right?
Right.
We put troops in the Middle East. I got it was 82nd ended up in Kuwait for a while.
I believe
Standby, getting ready to go.
Not 82nd, it's 101. Get it done. But
I don't know. This is something I'm keeping an eye on right now, just because I feel like there's a lot of more now than we saw for most of throughout the war in Ukraine. It seems like I don't know if it's because people view some of these Middle Eastern countries as like less capable than Russia, or not nuclear. So it's a different story. but there's a little bit more of a drumbeat for war right now than I think, and I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, that is totally true. And to be fair, we can't be too biased here. The United States, the military, the Navy is like, if you guys try something, you guys, proxy units, you're on, we're here. We have strike groups. We have missile defense systems. So the threats are being thrown both ways. And yeah, and you're right. The United States is on like that 2001 war kick, 2003 war kick of they better not do something about it because we're there and we're ready. So I think I would
Positive
like
note.
to think I hope nothing happens. That's what team I'm on. Now I do have a question for you. This might be a little open ended. Is what is the biggest shock from the Israeli Defense Forces and then from Hamas from the beginning of this war up until right now? Like, what is something that you're reading this and you're like, oh, okay. Is there anything stuck out to you?
Yeah, the easy answer is the fact that October 7th happened at all. But that's not groundbreaking. I would say the Israeli media efforts. They started out, in my opinion, they started out very strong. Multiple briefings a day,
Yeah.
in English and Hebrew, and just a flood of information. They stood up, these daily sit reps. And again, for like the first week or two, they were very detailed. There's a lot of information. It's they haven't built on that from my perspective.
Okay.
It's gotten a little more vague, a little less information, I would say, coming out. I feel like Hamas has the upper hand right now in the information space. And
Yeah. That's interesting. Why is that?
there's a lot more. It's a lot more. I think one of the challenges Israel faces is that I think a lot of the Hamas support is more grassroots. So you get a much more widespread audience sharing that information, putting out their opinion than you would on behalf of a state government, for sure.
Okay.
But in terms of like media production, I don't know. I thought that there would be a lot more coming out of Israel at this point. Ukraine, for instance, has, from day one was pumping out information, and
Yeah.
it's not comparable at this point.
Also, straight from Zelensky himself. Like, he's still on it every single day. Like, here's what's happening. Slava Ukraine. So,
Yeah. So that has been surprising to me. And then in terms of Hamas, surprise, also the fact that they did that on October 7th because they knew Israel was coming. That was interesting. And then it doesn't look like as Israel moved into Gaza, there were relatively few Hamas attacks on the outskirts of the city. There was fighting, but it wasn't a lot. So I don't know if surprise is the right way to put that.
okay.
It makes me nervous that they're waiting for something more. But
Yes.
early on, when Israel was kind of pushing right into Gaza in the north and the east of Gaza City, there's some pretty wide open plains or wide open fields up there that would make for long range ATGM strikes or even drone strikes. We didn't see a lot of that.
Yeah.
So why?
Do you think this Hamas attack was a offensive or a defensive action?
I don't know.
Have you
I'm having
seen
a
that
hard
narrative a little bit, or
defensive as I don't think I
as in
understand
like
like
preemptive, like we're defending ourselves by actually attacking you, sort of like again I used Damascus, Aleppo airport. Israel struck those airports so that they can't use it. You can say it's a defensive tactic.
Yeah, but that's what Hamas has been doing for a long time. Like I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I'd have a hard time.
Well, you had
Calling
said
it
the word
defensive
because
percent.
Hamas knows they're coming. So I didn't know if that was your way of saying this was like a preemptive way for Hamas to
Oh
try
no,
stopping them.
knowing they're
Okay.
coming, as in you're not going to do something like that, and then Israel's going to say, "Well
Okay.
played. Guess
Okay.
we better rebuild that fence." Like
Okay.
they had to have known that Israel was going to come in force
Okay.
right away. So it's not clear, like if it was designed to bolster international support. If they thought that Israel was weaker now, or if there's enough political divide in Israel to
Sure.
actually do something, I'm not sure. That's
Yeah.
part of my confusion there. What about you?
Okay.
What's the Most surprising things at this point.
You said two things. I don't think people are aware of how divided Israel was before this attack. And then to all of a sudden, we are united, let's fight under one common cause. You do see this throughout human history of we need to stand together. What surprises me though is you know that your enemy is right there. This is not like the United States has some issues with Mexico. Okay, you know. No, this is like if Afghanistan was our neighbor and we're at war with them, and then we stop and like, hey, we know that they're our enemy, but then these border guard posts, outposts were just overwhelmed. No matter what, I think even from the US military that we would have had problems, even with our technology and our expertise, because it looks like Hamas had way more of a manpower advantage and how fast they were able to do the attack. But I'm not the only one saying this. I don't think that this is that shocking that I'm saying this.
Yeah.
I'm surprised just how not prepared they were, knowing your enemy is what's like the closest, like 300 meters away. They're right there. That's the number one thing I'm shocked for from the Israeli Defense Forces. And I want to add this on top. Not me saying this. The prime minister even said he's willing to go under investigation because of this. Did you know that?
Yeah,
He's
but
ready
not
to go
until
under
after but not until after the war is over, right? So,
and when's the war going to be over?
yeah,
Literally.
I'm hesitant to get too. It's a weird mix here. Like, look, I don't understand American politics. I dive into it every single day, and still, like, it baffles me. So I know that there's no amount of like reading in the next few weeks is going to get me up to speed on Israeli politics. So I know that that's an aspect here, but it's just not an area I've spent a lot of time on.
Okay. From the Hamas perspective is we knew there were tunnels and we knew they were good. It's just I don't think we realized how good they were. From a combat engineer perspective, I'm thinking like, how would my unit be able to clear this all out? I mean, you look at Vietnam, the tunnel rats, those were combat engineers. You go in with your little pistol and your flashlight. This is not that. And a lot of people like to make that correlation. It's not that at all because first off, we have the underlying issue of the hostages, which maybe we should talk about that. I don't know. You can't take out a tunnel. You can't just take it all out. You can only take out the portal of the tunnel, the exit or the entrance, because there might be hostages in there. And so to clearing out these tunnels, it's insane. So that to me was so surprising from Hamas is how many entrances or exits they have. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of the combat footage. They're just popping up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Ambush, goodbye.
Dude, I can't
that
wait.
to me is like,
Can't
wow.
wait until these tunnels are mapped and we have some 3D infographic showing. It's gonna be wild.
Yeah, because there is the leaked map or the open source map from like 2021, and it gives you that idea of you have overlapping here. So if this tunnel is taken out, we have this tunnel over here. What you're seeing in actual combat footage and on the ground, I'm not on the ground, but from what I'm seeing, they have like tunnels under like destroyed cars. How did that car get there? You know? So it's that to me is wow, insane. I don't know how those combat engineers are going to do it other than going inch by inch. But from what you said,
Nasty.
they're not going to do the door to door. So
We'll see. They got to deal with it at some point. But yo, kiddo's almost home, so I'm gonna jump for now.
okay,
But appreciate the chat as always, Marcus. We'll do
thank
this
you
again,
so
man.
much. All right, awesome. We'll see you.
Later.